just a couple hours ago in an Arizona courtroom, the verdict the entire nation was watching. Jodi Arias, who was suspected of murdering her ex-boyfriend, Travis Alexander, on June 4th, 2008. The jury of 12 came in with their verdict. This was the verdict.
State of Arizona versus Jodi Arias, verdict, count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn, in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder, guilty. Is this your true verdict, so say you want it all?
So guilty today in Arizona, Jodi Arias going down. 5 of the jurors said premeditated homicide. 7 of them said premeditated plus felony homicide. What's the distinction? What's the difference? We also need to find out what happens next. Death penalty or life without parole? What happens in the penalty phase? A lot to discuss. So joining me now, an expert in all things Jodi Arias, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, Rene Sandler, joining us. Rene, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So, Rene, because I haven't covered this story too much, it's just not, I'm more into politics than I am sex and violence and murder of, loved ones. It's just not my thing. But so just to recap this, if I could, and tell me where I go wrong here. What happened with Jodi Arias? So June 4th, 2008, Travis Alexander, her ex-boyfriend, his throat was slit. He was shot, stabbed 27 times, and then placed in his shower. And the ex-girlfriend, Jodi Arias, said, "Oh, I had nothing to do with it. It must have been intruders." And then she said, "Oh, well, actually, I did kill him, but it was self-defense because he beat me and sexually abused me." So that was June of 2008. Then the trial began January 2nd of this year, January 2nd, 2013. It lasted 67 days. She testified, Jodi Arias, for 18 days, which seems like a long period of time. So let's pick it up from there. Walk us through this trial, why it became such a spectacle. And let's open, why did Jodi Arias testify for 18 days?
Jodi Arias, let's start with that. She testified, highly unusual for a criminal defendant to testify at all. And in this case, however, we're talking death penalty. I mean, Jodi Arias took the stand in the case in chief, in the main case, to save her life. And the theory of the defense was self-defense. And I think in part they wanted her on there as long as they could to try and connect with at least one juror because Jodi had a way with people generally, particularly men.
Do you think, I got to dispute that for a second here. She seems very unlikable, and I mean that as an impartial observer. She seems like a cold person, and why having her up there for 18 days and she was recounting every sexual detail of her past? Why do you think that would make her likable? I'm trying to understand this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, her history supports her connecting primarily with men. And on a jury with 8 men and 4 women, I believe the defense was trying to appeal to at least one, and i.e. a man.
Mm-hmm.
Even the age range, just the breakdown of the demographics of the jurors, it was a gamble they were worth taking. But in a different light, they had to take that chance by putting her on the stand because they put forward a theory of self-defense. Now, the initial stories by Jodi Arias were 2 ninjas broke in and did this. Then it went to, I wasn't even there. And then years later...
By the way, were these ninjas the same ones that killed Nicole Brown Simpson?
I believe so.
Okay, the real killer. So she said the intruders did it, and then how long into it did she retract that and say, you know what, I'm going to go with the self-defense claim?
Well, years. Literally years. It was, I wasn't there, I don't know what happened, to ninjas doing it. And I mean ninjas, not just intruders.
Why ninja? If we were in Japan, then I would go for a potential ninja defense, but this is in Arizona. Are there many ninjas in Arizona?
Not to my knowledge, but this was the ninja theory of killing. And then years later, 3 years, 4 years later, did self-defense come about for the very first time. And then we hear about alleged abuse and post-traumatic stress. And so all of that evolved over time.
Can I ask you about the self-defense claim? Because she's saying that he was abusive towards her, etc. So if she had shot him once in the head, maybe you could say, yeah, okay, so he was beating her and she shot him in defense. I could buy into that as a juror. But his throat was slit. he was shot and then stabbed 27 times. That, to me, doesn't feel like a self-defense thing. That seems like somebody really psychotic and pissed off. And the prosecution theory was that her ex-boyfriend, Travis Alexander, refused to see her anymore and was dating other women. Is that correct?
That is correct. The defense essentially was that she snapped and that she feared, as a reasonable person in her position, that's the standard, feared for her life at that moment and used deadly force to protect herself. There's multiple layers of problems with that, given that the reasonable person, i.e. Jodi Arias, is a known liar. So it was a difficult sell for the defense to get the jury to buy into self-defense. But on another point, the crime scene showed complete lack of planning if you're just looking objectively at this crime scene. If somebody was going to plan and premeditate a murder, they would have done a better job of carrying it out. But in this case, the state clearly proved, beyond a reasonable doubt, premeditation, which goes into your question of felony murder versus premeditated first-degree.
Right, so let's answer that. I just want to reset this up for people just joining. So Rene Sandler is with us. So Jodi Arias' verdict just came in today. She's guilty, first-degree murder. The 12 jurors all saying guilty, but 5 of them said premeditated. 7 of them said premeditated plus felony. I didn't realize the jurors even broke stuff like that down. What does that even mean when some say premeditated and then others say premeditated plus felony? What does that? Walk us through that.
Sure. In this case, the state presented 2 variations of first-degree murder for the jury to have to decide, one or the other, or they could have rejected both and then moved to second-degree murder or manslaughter. Jury rejected, obviously, second-degree murder and manslaughter. So 2 versions of first-degree murder. One, premeditation, meaning the planning, deliberation, some aspect of planning, even if it's momentary, for the killing. Or did she go to Travis Alexander's home with the intent to commit a felony inside and carried out this intentional killing? So a slight variation. It's the felony plus premeditation or just premeditation. And you see the split decision there, 5 and 7.
Okay, I apologize. I'm still not getting it, though. So premeditated versus premeditated plus felony. When you're going to commit a crime that's as serious, isn't it automatically assumed that that will be a felony? So why the distinction? I'm not getting it.
Okay. A felony separate from the killing, burglary, breaking and entering, the use of a handgun in the commission of a crime of violence.
Okay, so it's just another layer of premeditation then. It's even worse than premeditation. Premeditation plus felony. She's going to kill him but also do some other stuff.
Correct.
Okay, I get that. That makes sense. So all 12 of them say guilty in the first degree, but 5 of them said one way, 7 the other. So will she get the death penalty or life without parole? So we enter the second phase, the penalty phase. Walk us through the timeline of when she'll get sentenced, and what does your gut tell you? What will she get?
Well, in this case, because it's a death penalty case, there's an intermediate step, and that step is called the aggravation phase or the mitigation phase. And that begins tomorrow, if you can believe that. The woman finds out today she's convicted of first-degree murder, and she begins the next phase of the case tomorrow. And in this case, the aggravating factor for the jury to consider is whether or not there was cruelty by the physical or mental aspect of this death. And they have to look at the characteristics of the killing. The very first witness tomorrow will be the medical examiner who will testify for the 3rd time. Presumably, he will testify that Travis Alexander was almost decapitated in a violent rage and suffered. And if the jury finds cruelty beyond a reasonable doubt, unanimous beyond a reasonable doubt, it then moves to the sentencing phase, last phase of the trial. And that's where you're looking at life or death.
Okay, and is it the jury, all 12, have to say yes to the death penalty? If one of them holds out, she will not get the death penalty?
Yes, it is unanimous. It has to be unanimous.
Okay, and what does your gut tell you? You think all 12, knowing what you know, will give her the death penalty, or there'll be one holdout?
It is the ultimate decision for us as doing our civic service to serve on a jury, asking to impose death on another human being. It is an incredibly difficult, stressful thing to ask. But this jury has all sworn that they will uphold their oath and have all said that they can impose death.
Right, because they ask them that before they get on the jury. In the jury pool, they say, hey, if she's guilty of this, blah, 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 and it's according to the law, would you vote for the death penalty? And if somebody says, oh, I'm just against the death penalty, they bounce them from the jury, right?
That is absolutely correct. They've been voir dired, is what it's called, and they've said they can do it. And I'm going to tell you that my prediction is they will.
I learned that in My Cousin Vinny, by the way. I learned everything I needed to know about the law. They're asking that woman, and she's like, yeah, I'd fry him. And that's where I learned that. So would you agree My Cousin Vinny, the most intelligent movie about the law?
I am so happy that you said that because I go around saying that is the best legal movie of all time.
Great. Well, we can agree on that. That's fantastic. Okay, last thing. We have a minute left. Rene Sandler joining us, talking about the Jodi Arias verdict that just came in today. Guilty in the first degree of murder. Why this case became such a sideshow. HLN, the cable network. I tuned in last night. I was just curious intellectually. They had like a little party, like with champagne and balloons, and they were all talking about Jodi Arias. It felt like they were watching The Real Housewives on Bravo. What are people sick? What's going on? Why the celebration of this case?
It feels like a sporting event, doesn't it? It really is a pretty sad commentary. Sex sells.
Yeah, it does. Maybe I should introduce sex into this program. I'm thinking, I don't know, like strippers or something, like Howard Stern. Will that work?
This case had it all. If somebody didn't learn something from this trial, I'd be surprised.
Yeah. All right. Well, Rene Sandler, you are an expert, and I really appreciate all your knowledge about this. I want to go to you again, a great criminal defense attorney, Rene Sandler in Maryland. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. All the best.